Hi, I'm Emily Deschweinitz-Taylor. I have two different blog posts about identity and conflict. And the topic I wanted to talk about today was conflict-based identities. And you're like, what does that mean? Anyway, identity, having a positive identity is actually a human need that crosses all different peoples and cultures. And we often create our identities based on positive attributes or experiences, but sometimes we create our identities based on conflicts or important survival or traumas that we've gone through. And I wanted to talk about some of the benefits and drawbacks of creating our identities based on a specific difficult thing that we have been through in life. So, in terms of something positive, when we've been through something difficult, say sexual harassment or abuse, we've been through a war, we're a veteran, we've had substance abuse and overcome it, we can actually use that identity to serve many very positive purposes that we can advocate, we can draw attention to certain social issues, and then have positive changes brought about because people have greater awareness of needs and they know how to deal with people in a healing and positive way that have been through similar traumas. But there are some drawbacks to our having conflict-based identities, and that is sometimes, and I'll refer to my notes just so I don't skip anything, but the conflict may yoke us to the past. This may be something that continually we look backwards instead of forwards because of that personal identity. A second thing, we may separate ourselves from important others who lack that same experience and say that we're too different to ever understand each other. We may elevate ourselves in saying we have more knowledge and that knowledge may actually separate us rather than unite us. And then we may not consider other very important areas of personal identity besides that particular conflict. So those are personal drawbacks. There are also community drawbacks in certain ways when an entire group focuses exclusively on that conflict-based identity and doesn't try to draw common ground with others who haven't experienced that similar happening or conflict in their lives. So when we're trying to seek cooperation, we're trying to seek overlap rather than just merely difference. And at times when we rely heavily on our conflict-based identities, that may prevent forgiveness and unity. And when I bring up that, I'm not saying that forgiveness and reconciliation are the same thing, but in terms of perpetuating a conflict-based identity, it may limit us and others from positive change. So, and then there's one other thing that I wanted to talk about in terms of the hazards of conflict-based identities that can be imposed by others on us. So have you ever heard these kind of stereotypes like blondes are dumb, women bosses are wenches, divorced men are women are men haters, Southern men are chauvinists, or Muslims are terrorists? None of these simplistic identity labels that are imposed by others onto groups of people serve us to create peace, understanding, cooperation. They're actually very simplistic, and this is a time when we actually need unity. So then there's the other interesting thing of what happens when the conflict goes away, or simply the person that we formed our identity around because of a negative experience, they've changed. What then? So if we have focused exclusively on that conflict-based identity, when there's positive changes, we're going to struggle a little bit to come up with who we are post-conflict. Anyway, just some philosophical ideas for you to think about, but the real need in our culture is to widen our perspective of who we relate to, that to not narrowly define ourselves and rigidly guard those identities without seeing that there's overlap with other people within our culture. Anyway, there's lots more to talk on with this subject, but if you want to read more about it on conflictfluent.com. And I also have a website that's focused on parenting that's called raisingmediators.com. But just take the time to reflect a little bit about what are your main sources of personal identity. And if there are conflict-based identities, meaning, I'm been through a divorce and I constantly refer to me being a single person because of that divorce, perhaps that's limiting you in terms of the identities that you're able to overlap with others. Anyway, just some thoughts.